The old highway stretched endlessly through the mountains, its cracked asphalt telling stories of forgotten travelers and abandoned dreams. Rain drummed against the windshield of the black SUV as it cut through the evening mist, headlights piercing the growing darkness. Behind the wheel, Dwayne Johnson let out a slow breath, his massive hands relaxed on the steering wheel. For the first time in months, he had nowhere to be, no cameras to face, no schedule demanding his attention. His phone had been buzzing for hours with missed calls from agents and producers, but he'd switched it off somewhere near the state line. John Cena sat in the passenger seat, equally content with the silence. They'd been friends for years, rivals turned brothers through countless battles in and out of the ring. Tonight, there were just two men seeking peace on a road that seemed to lead nowhere. "You see that?" Cena pointed through the rain-streaked glass at a flickering neon sign barely visible through the trees. The words Home Taste Diner glowed weakly in faded blue letters, half of them burned out. The building sat alone at the edge of a forgotten town, surrounded by tall pines that swayed in the wind like silent guardians. Dwayne squinted through the rain. "Looks like our kind of place." He pulled off the highway, gravel crunching beneath the tires as they entered the empty parking lot. The diner stood like a time capsule from the 1950s, its chrome exterior dulled by years of weather but somehow still welcoming. Through the windows, they could see warm yellow light spilling across red vinyl booths and checkered floors. As they stepped out of the SUV, the scent of rain mixed with something else, coffee, bacon, and the promise of home-cooked comfort food. The bell above the door chimed as they entered, and both men immediately felt transported to a simpler time. The walls were lined with faded photographs of smiling families, local high school football teams, and the diner's better days when the parking lot was full and laughter filled the air. A young woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a worn apron. She couldn't have been more than 22, with tired but kind eyes that widened slightly when she saw them. Her name tag read Sarah, and though she tried to hide it, they could see the exhaustion etched in the lines around her eyes. "Welcome," she said, her voice warm despite the weariness. "Sit anywhere you'd like. I'll be right with you." She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been doing this job far longer than her years suggested. But there was something else, a tension in her shoulders, a quick glance toward the windows as if expecting unwelcome visitors. They chose a booth near the back, and Sarah approached with menus and coffee. "What can I get you gentlemen tonight?" she asked, pen poised over her notepad. Her smile was genuine but fragile, like glass held together by sheer will. "Surprise us," Dwayne said, studying her face. "Whatever you recommend." Sarah blinked, clearly not used to customers who trusted her judgment. A real smile broke through a professional mask for just a moment. "I'll take care of you," she promised, disappearing back into the kitchen. The sound of sizzling and the clatter of dishes drifted out, along with the rich aroma of something that reminded both men of childhood kitchens and grandmother's cooking. As they waited, Cena noticed a little detail that spoke of struggle, the carefully repaired tiers in the booth seats, the way certain lights had been turned off to save electricity, the fact that they were the only customers on what should have been a busy Friday night. This place was fighting for its life. Sarah returned with plates piled high with comfort food that tasted like memories. Golden fried chicken, fluffy biscuits, creamy mashed potatoes, and green beans that had been slow-cooked with love. Every bite was perfect, seasoned with care and served with pride. "This is incredible," Cena said between bites. "You cook all this yourself?" Sarah nodded, refilling their coffee cups. "My daddy taught me. He opened this place 30 years ago, said good food and honest work were all a person needed to make it in this world." "Wise man," Dwayne observed. "He's still around." The question hung in the air for a moment too long, and Sarah's smile wavered. "Is in the hospital. Has been for months. Cancer." She said it matter-of-factly, but they could hear the pain underneath. "I'm trying to keep this place running until he gets better." The conversation was interrupted by the distant rumble of motorcycle engines growing closer. Sarah's face went pale, and her hand trembled slightly as she set down the coffee pot. Through the windows, they could see headlights approaching, 5 motorcycles cutting through the rain like harbingers of trouble. "Maybe you gentlemen should finish up," Sarah said quietly, her voice tight with fear. "It's getting late." But Dwayne and Cena exchanged a look that needed no words. They'd faced down opponents in rings around the world, stared down challenges that would break lesser men. They weren't going anywhere. The motorcycles pulled into the parking lot, engines revving unnecessarily loud in the quiet night. Through the rain-streaked windows, they could see the riders dismounting, leather-clad figures with the swagger of men who took what they wanted and feared no consequences. Sarah moved behind the counter, her hands shaking as she pretended to busy herself with cleaning. "Please," she whispered to her unexpected customers, "just go. They are not here for you." But as the first boot hit the diner's front steps, both men settled deeper into their booth, muscles tensing like coiled springs. The storm was about to break, and Sarah had no idea that the two strangers eating her father's recipes were about to change everything. The diner door exploded open with a violence that made the old building shudder. Rain and cold wind swept inside as 5 figures filled the doorway, their leather jackets glistening with moisture and menace. The leader stepped forward first, a tall, bearded man with arms covered in tattoos that spoke of prison time and violence. His eyes swept the diner with the casual arrogance of a predator surveying his territory. Well, he said, his voice carrying the rough edge of cigarettes and cruelty. "Little Sarah's got customers tonight. That's real nice." His companions spread out behind him, blocking any chance of escape. They moved with the practiced coordination of a pack, each one knowing their role in the intimidation that was about to unfold. Sarah stood frozen behind the counter, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge. "It's not payment day, Marcus," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "You know that." The biker leader laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Payment day is whenever I say it is, sweetheart. And seeing as you've got paying customers, that means you've got money." From their booth, Dwayne and Cena watched the scene unfold with the calm intensity of men who'd seen violence before. They noticed everything, the way the bikers positioned themselves, the fear in Sarah's eyes, the calculation in Marcus's movements. These weren't random troublemakers. They were organized, methodical, and dangerous. "I already told you." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I don't have anything extra. Every penny goes to the hospital, to keeping this place running." Marcus stepped closer to the counter, his boots heavy on the worn linoleum. "That's real touching, but your daddy's medical bills ain't my problem. Your debt to us is." One of the other bikers, a wiry man with missing teeth, grinned nastily. "Maybe we should discuss this somewhere more private." His eyes roamed over Sarah in a way that made her skin crawl. "The kitchen's got plenty of room for conversation." "That won't be necessary." Dwayne's voice cut through the tension like a blade, calm and controlled but carrying an undercurrent of steel. All 5 bikers turned to look at him, taking in his massive frame and the quiet confidence that radiated from every inch of his being. Marcus squinted through the dim light, recognition flickering in his eyes. "I know you," he said slowly. "You're that wrestling guy. The Rock." He laughed again, this time with genuine amusement. "Well, ain't this something? A celebrity in our little diner." "Just a man having dinner," Dwayne replied, cutting another piece of chicken with deliberate calm. "And I'd like to finish it in peace." The casual dismissal in his tone made Marcus's face darken with anger. He wasn't used to being ignored, especially not by some Hollywood pretty boy who thought fame made him untouchable. "You hear that, boys?" Marcus called to his crew. "The famous guy wants peace." He turned back to Dwayne, his hand moving to rest on something tucked in his jacket. "Well, here's some free advice, movie star. This is real life, not one of your fake wrestling matches. You best mind your own business." Cena set down his fork with the same careful precision, his eyes never leaving the bikers. "The lady said she doesn't have your money. Maybe you should come back when she does." His voice was perfectly reasonable, but there was something in his posture that made the smarter bikers take half a step back. The missing-tooth biker pulled out a switchblade, flicking it open with a metallic snap. "Maybe we should teach these Hollywood types some manners, Marcus." But their leader held up a hand, his calculating mind working through the situation. 5 against 2 seemed like good odds, but these weren't ordinary men, and this wasn't going according to plan. "Sarah," Marcus said, his attention returning to the terrified girl behind the counter, "you've got until midnight tomorrow to find my money. All of it, plus interest for making me come out in the rain." He leaned across the counter, close enough that she could smell the beer and cigarettes on his breath. "And if you don't have it..." He let the threat hang in the air, unfinished but clear. Sarah nodded quickly, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "I understand," she whispered. "I'll have it." Marcus smiled, satisfied with her fear. He thought he'd won this round. Smart girl. He straightened up, adjusting his jacket. "Come on, boys. Let's leave the celebrities to their dinner." But as they started toward the door, he paused. "Oh, and Sarah, next time you have customers, remember who really owns this place." The bikers filed out into the rain, their laughter echoing across the parking lot as they mounted their motorcycles. The engines roared to life, deliberately loud and threatening, before they disappeared back into the night. The sudden silence felt overwhelming after their presence. Sarah collapsed into a chair behind the counter, her whole body shaking with delayed reaction. "I'm sorry," she said through tears she could no longer hold back. "I'm so sorry you had to see that. They've been coming here for months, ever since Daddy got sick, and I had to take out loans to keep us afloat." Dwayne and Cena exchanged another look, this one filled with grim determination. They'd both grown up in tough neighborhoods, knew what it meant when predators circled someone vulnerable. "How much do you owe them?" Cena asked gently. 10,000, Sarah whispered. "But every month they add more interest, more fees. It never goes down, no matter how much I pay." She wiped her eyes with her apron. "They don't really want the money. They want to own me, own this place. My daddy built this with his own hands, and they want to take it all away." Dwayne stood up slowly, his massive frame unfolding like a mountain rising from the earth. "No, they don't," he said with quiet certainty. "They think they do, but they're wrong." He reached for his wallet, but Sarah shook her head frantically. "No, please. I can't take charity. I won't." Her pride, battered but not broken, flared up despite her fear. "This is my fight." Cena smiled at that, recognizing the steel beneath her fragile appearance. "Every warrior needs backup," he said. "That's not charity. That's strategy." Outside, thunder rumbled across the sky, and rain began falling harder against the windows. The storm was far from over, but inside the diner, something had changed. Sarah had spent months facing her nightmare alone, but now she had allies she never could have imagined. The question was whether even two of the world's toughest men could stand against the darkness that was coming for her. 24 hours passed like a hell breath. Sarah opened the diner the next morning, going through the motions of normalcy while her stomach twisted with dread. The coffee tasted bitter, the sunlight streaming through the windows felt too bright, and every sound from the highway made her jump. She'd barely slept, lying awake imagining what Marcus and his crew would do when midnight came and she still couldn't pay. She'd counted every dollar 3 times. Between the till, her savings, and even the emergency fund she'd hidden in her father's old coffee can, she had maybe $3,000, not even close to what they demanded, and she knew they wouldn't accept partial payment. They wanted her broken, desperate, completely under their control. Around noon, the familiar black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Sarah felt her first moment of relief in hours as Dwayne and John walked through the door. They looked different today, more alert, their eyes scanning the surroundings with the intensity of men preparing for battle. "How are you holding up?" Dwayne asked, settling into the same booth as the night before. His voice was gentle, but Sarah could see the steel beneath it. These weren't just kind strangers anymore. They were warriors choosing their battlefield. "I keep thinking about running," she admitted, pouring their coffee with trembling hands. "Just getting in my car and driving until I can't anymore. Maybe they'd leave Daddy alone if I disappeared." John reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "Running doesn't solve anything. It just moves the problem to someone else." Sarah sat down across from them, unable to pretend she was busy when the diner was empty except for the 3 of them. "You don't understand what you're getting into. Marcus isn't just some local bully. His crew runs drugs, steals cars, hurts people who get in their way. The police are either scared of them or bought by them." "We've dealt with bullies before," Dwayne said calmly. "The size doesn't matter. The principle stays the same." He pulled out his phone and made a call, walking toward the window as he spoke in low tones. Sarah couldn't hear the words, but something about his posture suggested he was calling in favors, mobilizing resources. John stayed at the table, his presence somehow making the diner feel safer despite the approaching danger. "Tell me about this place," he said, gesturing at the photographs on the walls. "Your father built all this." Sarah's face softened as she looked around her family's legacy. He was 17 when he started working construction to save money for his own business. Took him 12 years to buy this land and build the diner. Mom designed the interior, picked out every booth, every light fixture. Her voice grew stronger as she talked about better times. They met when she was a waitress at a truck stop in Nevada. Dad said she made the best pie he'd ever tasted. "What happened to her?" John asked gently. "Cancer, same as Daddy, 8 years ago." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they were different now, not tears of fear but of love and loss. "She made me promise to keep this place alive, to take care of Daddy. I'm trying so hard, but everything keeps falling apart." Dwayne returned to the table, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Help is coming," he said simply, "but it won't get here until tomorrow night at the earliest. Tonight, it's just us." Sarah felt her heart sink. "You can't fight 5 armed men. This isn't a movie." "You're right," John agreed. "This is real life, which means we don't take stupid chances." He pulled out his own phone and showed her a photograph. "That's my niece. She's about your age, working her way through nursing school. If someone was threatening her the way they're threatening you, I'd want someone to stand up and help." The afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah tried to stay busy, cleaning tables that were already spotless, reorganizing supplies that didn't need organizing. The 2 men helped where they could, Dwayne fixing a loose hinge on the kitchen door while John repaired a wobbly table leg. Their calm competence was reassuring, but Sarah could see the tension building in their movements. As evening approached, regular customers who might have stopped by seemed to sense trouble and stayed away. The parking lot remained empty except for the SUV, creating an eerie feeling of isolation. Sarah found herself jumping at every shadow, every distant sound of an engine on the highway. "They'll come just after midnight," she said, checking the clock for the 100th time. "Marcus likes the psychology of it, making people wait, letting fear build up." She paused in her nervous cleaning. "You could still leave. Nobody would think less of you." Dwayne looked up from the booth where he'd been sitting quietly, mentally preparing for what was coming. "My grandmother used to say that a person's character isn't measured by how they treat people who can help them, but by how they treat people who can't." He met Sarah's eyes directly. "You can't help us, Sarah, so this is about character." At 11:30, John checked his watch and stood up. "Time to get ready." The 2 men began moving through the diner with military precision, noting sight lines, identifying potential weapons, planning their strategy. They moved the tables to create clear pathways, positioned themselves where they'd have the best advantage. "Stay behind the counter," Dwayne instructed Sarah. "No matter what happens, don't try to help. We can't protect you if we're worried about where you are." Sarah nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. The clock on the wall ticked with impossible loudness, each second bringing them closer to violence. At 11:58, they heard the first motorcycle engine in the distance. Then another, and another. The sound grew louder, more threatening, until the night air was filled with a rumble of machines designed to intimidate. Car doors slammed in the parking lot. More than 5, Sarah realized with growing horror. Marcus had brought reinforcements. 8 of them, John observed, peering through the blinds. 3 more than last night. Dwayne cracked his knuckles, a sound like branches breaking. "Evens the odds a little." His joke fell flat in the tense atmosphere, but Sarah caught the confidence beneath it. These men weren't afraid. They were ready. The footsteps approached the door like drumbeats of approaching doom. Sarah crouched behind the counter, her heart hammering so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. The clock hit midnight with a chime that seemed to echo through the silent diner. Then Marcus's voice cut through the night. "Time's up, little girl. Open the door, or we'll open it for you." The handle rattled violently, followed by a heavy boot kicking against the frame. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Dwayne and John took their positions, muscles coiled like springs ready to unleash years of training and raw determination. In the distance, Sarah could hear more engines approaching, but these sounded different. Official, hopeful. The cavalry was coming, but they weren't going to arrive in time. For the next few minutes, it would be just two men standing between a terrified young woman and the monsters who wanted to destroy everything she held dear. The door splintered inward, and hell came calling. The door didn't just open. It exploded inward in a shower of splinters and twisted metal. Marcus filled the doorway like a nightmare made flesh, his face twisted with rage at having to break down the door of a place he considered his property. Behind him, 7 more figures crowded in, all leather and chains, and barely contained violence. "Sarah!" Marcus roared, scanning the diner until his eyes locked on a huddled form behind the counter. "You had 24 hours to get my money, and instead you locked me out of my own property." His boots thundered against the floor as he stalked toward her, rage making him careless, making him forget about the 2 men who'd been waiting for exactly this moment. "The ladies closed for business," Dwayne said, rising from behind a booth like a mountain emerging from shadow. His voice was perfectly calm, but every muscle in his body was coiled and ready. Marcus spun toward the voice, his hand reaching for the gun tucked in his jacket. "I told you celebrities to mind your own." His words died as John Cena stepped out from behind the counter, having circled around while Marcus was distracted. Now the bikers were caught between 2 of the most physically imposing men on the planet, and suddenly their numbers advantage didn't seem quite so overwhelming. 8 on 2. The missing 2 bikers said with a nervous laugh, trying to convince himself those were still good odds. "I like our chances." But his hand shook as he pulled out his switchblade, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool night air. Marcus pulled his gun, a snub-nosed revolver that looked like a toy in his massive hands. "You think because you're famous, you're bulletproof," he snarled. "Let's see how tough you are when." He never finished the sentence. Dwayne moved with shocking speed for a man his size, covering the distance between them in 2 giant strides. His hand clamped down on Marcus's wrist like a steel trap, twisting until the gun clattered harmlessly across the floor. With his other hand, he grabbed the biker's shirt and lifted him off his feet as if he weighed nothing. "Big mistake," Dwayne growled, then drove his forehead into Marcus's nose with a sickening crunch. Blood exploded across the leader's face as he dropped to his knees, dazed and suddenly much less intimidating. The remaining bikers rushed forward in a wave of fury and desperation. 2 went for Dwayne while he was dealing with Marcus, thinking they could overwhelm him with numbers. The first one swung a chain at his head, but Dwayne ducked low and drove his shoulder into the man's midsection, lifting him up and slamming him down onto a table with bone-jarring force. The table collapsed under the impact, leaving the biker groaning in a pile of broken wood and twisted metal. The second attacker tried to grab Dwayne from behind, wrapping his arms around the wrestler's throat in what should have been a chokehold. Instead, Dwayne simply reached back, grabbed the man by the head, and flipped him forward over his shoulder. The biker crashed into the jukebox with a sound like thunder, coins spilling across the floor as the machine sparked and went silent. Meanwhile, John was handling his own attackers with surgical precision. A massive biker with arms like tree trunks came at him swinging wildly, counting on his size to intimidate. John ducked the first punch, weaved around the second, then drove 3 quick jabs into the man's ribs that folded him in half. As the biker doubled over, John grabbed him around the waist and lifted him high overhead before driving him down onto his knee with a devastating backbreaker that echoed through the diner. Another attacker tried to use a broken bottle as a weapon, slashing at John's face with vicious intent. John caught the man's wrist, twisted it until the bottle fell, then grabbed him by the throat and the belt. With one smooth motion, he lifted the biker over his head and threw him through the front window. Glass exploded outward in a shower of glittering fragments as the man landed hard in the parking lot, groaning but no longer interested in fighting. The missing-tooth biker had been hanging back, looking for an opportunity to strike while the 2 wrestlers were distracted. He saw his chance when Dwayne was dealing with Marcus and rushed forward with his switchblade raised. But Sarah saw him coming and screamed a warning. Dwayne spun just in time to see the blade coming toward his back. He grabbed a metal napkin dispenser from the nearest table and swung it like a club, connecting with the attacker's wrist with a crunch that sent the knife spinning away. Before the man could recover, Dwayne wrapped his arms around him and lifted him high in the air, then brought him down across his knee in a spine-bending move that left the biker writhing on the floor. 2 more bikers tried to rush John simultaneously, thinking they could overwhelm him with a coordinated attack. The first one aimed a kick at his midsection, while the second swung a pool cue he grabbed from somewhere. John caught the foot, twisted hard to spin the man around, then clotheslined him so hard he flipped completely over and crashed into a booth. The second attacker's pool cue shattered against John's forearm, which he'd raised a block. John didn't even flinch as he grabbed the shocked biker by the shirt and launched him across the diner, where he collided with his friend in a tangle of limbs and groans. Marcus, blood streaming from his broken nose, tried to crawl toward his fallen gun. But Dwayne saw him moving and stepped on his hand with one massive boot, applying just enough pressure to make the biker leader scream. "Going some way?" Dwayne asked conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather instead of fighting for their lives. The last standing biker, a wiry man with prison tattoos covering his arms, looked around at his fallen comrades and made a calculation. 8 men had walked into this diner full of confidence and violence. Now 7 were on the floor in various states of consciousness, and he was alone against 2 men who'd barely broken a sweat. He turned and ran for the broken door, but John was faster. He caught the fleeing biker in 3 quick strides, wrapped one powerful arm around his chest, and lifted him off the ground. "Where do you think you're going?" John asked pleasantly, before applying a sleeper hold that had the man unconscious in seconds. The diner fell silent except for the groaning of injured bikers and the sound of Sarah sobbing behind the counter. In the space of less than 3 minutes, 8 dangerous criminals had been reduced to a pile of broken bones and wounded pride. Dwayne and John stood in the wreckage, breathing hard but victorious, their clothes torn but their bodies intact. Outside, the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, along with a distinctive rumble of federal vehicles. The cavalry had finally arrived, but the battle was already over. Sarah emerged from behind the counter on shaking legs, staring in amazement at the scene before her. "Is it over?" she whispered, hardly daring to believe that her nightmare might actually be ending. Dwayne looked down at Marcus, who was clutching his broken nose and glaring up at them with hatred and pain. "For them, it is," he said grimly. "But for you, it's just a beginning. A better beginning." The first police car pulled into the parking lot, followed by 2 unmarked federal vehicles. Through the shattered window, they could see agents in bulletproof vests approaching with weapons drawn, ready to clean up the mess that 8 foolish men had made when they decided to threaten the wrong woman. The next few hours passed in a blur of flashing lights, official questions, and the methodical process of justice finally arriving in a place that had been forgotten for too long. Federal agents moved through the diner like a well-trained team, photographing evidence, treating the injured bikers, and carefully documenting every detail of what had become a textbook takedown of a criminal organization. Agent Maria Rodriguez, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, interviewed Sarah while paramedics checked her for injuries. "We've been tracking this crew for 2 years, she explained, her voice filled with professional satisfaction. Drug trafficking, extortion, armed robbery. They thought being in a small town made them invisible. Your call finally gave us the evidence we needed." Sarah looked confused. "My call? I never called anyone." Agent Rodriguez smiled and nodded toward Dwayne and John, who were giving their statements to other agents. "Your friends did. Yesterday afternoon. They provided us with recordings of the threats, photographs of the damage, even financial records showing the illegal loan practices. We had units staged 20 miles away, waiting for these guys to make their move." Marcus and his crew were loaded into the backs of federal transport vehicles, their reign of terror over forever. As Marcus was helped to his feet, his nose clearly broken and his left arm in a makeshift sling, he locked eyes with Dwayne one last time. "This isn't over," he growled through swollen lips. Dwayne stepped closer, his massive frame casting a shadow over the defeated biker. "Yes, it is," he said quietly. "You threatened an innocent woman trying to care for her sick father. You terrorized a community. You thought strength meant hurting people weaker than you." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Now you know what real strength looks like." As the last federal vehicle disappeared into the dawn, Sarah stood in the doorway of a battered but still standing diner. The front window was boarded up with plywood. Several tables were broken beyond repair, and there were bloodstains on the floor that would take scrubbing to remove. But the building was still Hayes, the business was still alive, and for the first time in months, she felt truly safe. "The insurance will cover most of this," John said, surveying the damage with a contractor's eye. "But it's going to take time to get everything fixed." He pulled out his phone and made a call, speaking quickly to someone who was clearly used to handling unusual requests. When he hung up, He was smiling. My crew will be here this afternoon. We'll have you reopened by next weekend. Sarah felt tears welling up again, but these were different from the ones she cried in fear and desperation. I can't let you pay for this, she protested. You've already done too much. Dwayne shook his head firmly. You're not letting us do anything. We're choosing to do it. There's a difference. As the morning progressed, word spread through the small town that the nightmare was finally over. People who hadn't dared venture out after dark for months began appearing at the diner, offering help, bringing supplies, sharing stories of their own encounters with Marcus's crew. Sarah realized that her ordeal had been just one part of a larger pattern of fear that had gripped the entire community. Mrs. Henderson, who owned the flower shop down the road, arrived with fresh daisies for every table. I wanted to eat here so many times, she confessed, but I was too scared after what happened to the Johnson family. Tom Martinez, who ran the auto shop, brought tools and lumber. That crew slashed my tires twice and threatened to burn down my garage. Today feels like Christmas morning. By afternoon, the diner had been transformed into a community center of sorts. Volunteers swept glass, patched holes, and shared stories of liberation. John coordinated the repairs with the efficiency of a man used to managing complex projects, while Dwayne helped move heavy equipment and listened to everyone who needed to tell their story. Sarah's phone rang around 3 o'clock. She answered it hesitantly, still jumpy about unexpected calls, but her face immediately brightened. Daddy? The doctor said what? She listened for a moment, tears streaming down her face, but these were tears of pure joy. Yes, I'm fine. Better than fine. I'll be there tonight to bring you home. When she hung up, she turned to her unexpected heroes with a smile that could have powered the town. The specialist said Daddy's responding better than anyone hoped. The new treatments are working. He's going to be okay. The entire diner erupted in cheers and applause from the volunteers who'd gathered to help rebuild. As evening approached, Dwayne and John prepared to leave. Their work here was done, and they both had obligations waiting in the wider world. Sarah walked them to their SUV, struggling to find words adequate for what they'd given her. How do I thank you for giving me my life back? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. John smiled and pointed back at the diner, where volunteers were still working and the community was coming back to life. You don't thank us. You pass it forward. Help the next person who needs it. Dwayne reached into the SUV and pulled out a small wrap package. This is from both of us, he said. Don't open it until we're gone. Sarah clutched the package to her chest, knowing she'd treasure it forever regardless of what was inside. As their SUV pulled back onto the highway, Sarah waved until the taillights disappeared around the curve. Then she went back inside and carefully opened the package. Inside was a small framed photo, not of her rescuers, but of her diner taken just moments before, showing the community gathered together, working, laughing, healing. At the bottom, in careful handwriting, were the words, "Heroes aren't born. They are forged by the choice to stand up. Now it's your turn to be someone's hero." 3 months later, the Home Taste Diner was thriving like never before. The parking lot was full every night. Tour buses occasionally stopped by, and Sarah had hired 3 additional employees to handle crowds. Her father was back on his feet, greeting customers and telling stories about the night his daughter's guardian angels had appeared out of nowhere. A small plaque by the front door read, "In memory of a dark night and the light that followed. When good people stand together, evil cannot win." Below it was a donation box for a fund Sarah had established to help other small businesses being victimized by criminals. Sarah kept the framed photo on a shelf behind the counter, and sometimes she'd catch herself looking at it and smiling. Somewhere out there, Dwayne Johnson and John Cena were probably helping someone else, fighting other battles against other bullies. But here in this small town, in this little diner built by love and saved by courage, their legacy lived on in every meal served with hope, every customer welcomed with genuine warmth, and every act of kindness that rippled outward into a world that desperately needed more heroes. The story had ended, but the legend was just beginning.